time for attendees to load in, so we're just going to give a couple minutes until we begin. Thanks for being here. I see the attendees climbing right now, so it's great to see you. This is our parent program, the final presentation of our virtual global fair this year. And we've expected great attendance, so we're glad to see you. And I do see the list climbing. I'll just remind those of you that are coming in that this is a webinar format. So attendees are muted and your video's off. In order to interact with us during the Q&A period, you can type your questions. You'll see a link to Q&A at the bottom of the page. I'll explain a little bit more of that as people come in. But that is where you can interact. I see somebody already added one. That's awesome. Also, for those of you that may have wondered yourselves or maybe have partners that couldn't come, this will be recorded and posted to YouTube. Okay, it's 1:02 and I see the attendee list kind of balancing out. So again, I'll say welcome. Just for those last people that came in, a reminder that this is a webinar format, so you can type your questions in the Q&A. I'm sure you're all pros at this point, whether it's college students or K through 12. We've all been on lots of webinars at this point. If you see a question that you also had or you like that question, you can click on the little thumbs up button to upvote that question. And that will just tell us this is a really popular question and we'll make sure we get to it. So this, as I mentioned, is the parent program of the Global Fair. This is our final program of a 2-week Global Fair, and we've really enjoyed this time in this, been forced into it, but also enjoyed this virtual experience. So I have a few slides to share with you, about 10 slides to share just about some general information about the IQP and also answering some of the questions that we received ahead of time. And then we really want to, use this time as a town hall and answer questions that you might have as well. Before I start that, I'd also like to just introduce Liz Chirico. You may have met her before, but she is your parent contact, and I'll give her a moment to say hello.
Great. Thank you, Erin. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm Liz Chirico. I work out of the University Advancement Office. My role primarily is to work with parents, and I help organize the Parents Association. It's a group comprised of parents across all class years who want to be more connected with WPI, more connected with the community that their student is involved with. And if you are interested, I'm happy to answer questions either at the end of today or you can email me. My address and contact information is all on the website. So thanks very much and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Liz. We've had a great working relationship with Liz, and we're happy to have her here today. So as I jump in, I just wanted to remind you that your students have been attending, and maybe you even saw some of the presentations over the last 2 weeks for our global fair. So the whole schedule, if you'd like to see what we presented on, is at Plus Global Fair 2020. And we had regional panel presentations where faculty directors gave presentations about their sites, some special topic highlights, other global experiences that students can have here on campus, and then return student sessions where students could talk to other students who had completed an off-campus project. So new format, usually this is a 1,000-person event in the rec center here on campus, but we've learned a lot, and I think, in the end, there will be things that we hold on to about this type of interaction, just opening up some opportunities for students. We also have continually pointed students towards the second link on this slide, which is Plus Off-Campus IQP. That is where everything about how to apply for the off-campus program, details that we've shared throughout the summer are all cataloged there. So if your student is just starting out, they should start with that second link. And that will get them to where they need to go. Another part of this virtual format that we've kind of reimagined for the way our office interacts with students, we started a online or a email newsletter about a month and a half ago, weekly newsletter that students have received about information about how to apply. And we are also hosting virtual application sessions. So if students have questions about the application, they can meet with one of the staff members in our office one-on-one. So I'll go into that a little bit more if anybody has questions. Very basic start to this for those of you that may be new to what the IQP is. So many of you probably know the IQP is a general education requirement here at WPI. Every student completes one, and it's typically a team-based project on teams of 3 or 4 people from students of all majors. So the design of the project is intentionally interdisciplinary, and the students could be working with an advisor from any department on campus. The goal is to solve a problem at the intersection of science and society and technology, with sponsors that run the gamut from NGOs to governmental organizations to other companies. There are longstanding sponsors in many of our locations that have seen the benefit of working with WPI students. Our last graduating class in 2020, 86% of the class completed at least one project off campus. And many of those students, the majority, are completing an off-campus project for their IQP. It is the junior year that typically students would complete their IQP, and it just falls naturally into the opportunity to do that off campus, as many other students on other campuses are doing study abroad at that time. So to break it down for students on how to apply for the off-campus IQP, we presented them with these 3 steps: explore, prepare, apply. Explore is right now. So we've encouraged students to go to the Global Fair events, to look around on our eProjects website, which is where they can see all the information about each project center, as well as start their application. And think about some of these factors that I've listed here. So first of all, what format for IQP are they interested in? This presentation today is mainly about the off-campus program, but I do want to mention, and I'll show you in a moment how these 2 things differ. I want to mention that students can complete an IQP on campus. So really it comes down to format and what works academically and schedule-wise for a student. We should also be thinking about what term works best. So we are offering and recruiting right now for terms E21 through E22. So the entire next academic year. Students should think carefully about how IQP is going to fit into their schedule, and they'll have the opportunity to tell us which terms are best for them. Also, project opportunities. Many of our project centers have themes that students may find of interest. Budgetary information, which I'll talk a little bit about finances and how that works for the off-campus program. And then location, since we have project centers all over the world. So as I said, I wanted to just explain the difference between the off-campus and the on-campus program. The off-campus IQP is a 1-term project. As you'll see here, this is an example of a project that would happen in C-term, where it's a cohort-based model where 24 students and 2 faculty members complete the project work together in an intensive 1 term. Those same students of that cohort in the term prior will have a social science research methods course. For those of you that kind of know the lingo, it's the ID 2050 course. And they will also have a proposal course, which is a 1/6, the kind of half a credit course that is specifically, it's a placeholder specifically for the work that they would do with their team and with their advisors about their specific project. So that course happens with the same cohort that would then be doing the project work together on the next term. Sometimes there's even preparation that happens 2 terms prior. So some examples are our Bangkok Project Center, our Cuenca Project Center, Ghana. Many of our centers have some sort of cultural or language prep that can happen as many as 2 terms prior. Sometimes it's credit-based, and sometimes it's tied to, it's not credit-based, but it may be tied to participation in the next term in the social science course. All the details about what preparation is required is listed on the eProject site for students, so they know ahead of time if there's going to be additional course information required. The other option is an on-campus IQP, and that is spread out over 3 terms. So there's no research methods course or ID 2050. This is much more, I like to say, much more organic, where the student would match up with an advisor who's hosting a project on campus, and then would form a team of usually 3 to 4 students still, but would do that project work over 3 terms. So it looks a little bit more like an independent research project. The students design the schedule that they're working on and the deliverables that when those are due with the advisor they're working with, and they still take 2 courses at the same time as the rest of their project work. This works for some students because of other commitments on campus, or maybe some off-campus commitments that don't allow them to go away for a whole term, or be dedicated to project work for a whole term. So that's the real distinction between the off-campus model and the on-campus model. If you want to just browse through all of the off-campus opportunities available, the best place for you to go is wpi.edu/plus-global-projects. And that is our public-facing list of all of our project centers. It'll tell you which term they're offered in, give you some examples of projects that have happened there, and obviously location and who the director of the project center is. So that's a great place if you just want to browse and see what's available to your student. So that's the Explore, and then we move on to preparing and applying. So many students are already into this process. I think we have over 350 applications started in our system already, which is great. I'm glad to see that students are starting early and thinking about what's required within the application. So the application for the off-campus IQP is a 2-step process. The students are asked to complete an application and then also a project center preference form. So the application includes a resume, 2 essays, and the names of references. We don't need reference letters, just the names of 2 references, along with some background information. And there's a full preview available for the students so that they know what to expect before they start. They can actually get into the application and save it before they submit. So we've had it open since August 28th. And we did that intentionally this year, so there was plenty of time to see the application, prepare for it, and then be ready to submit it by the deadline. The second part of the application is the preference form. And on my next slide, I'm going to explain a little bit more about how that works. But the students are going to be asked to rate all 58 site and term options available to them. So between E21 to E22, there are some sites that operate in multiple terms. So we don't have 58 locations. That would be a lot. But we do have 58 site and term options that students have available to them. So both of those forms, the application and the preference form, are due by October 5th. The preference form can be boiled down to some simple emojis. We are asking students to think about all those 58 options in terms of the places and the terms that they are very interested in, or not interested in at all. Maybe those terms or sites don't work for them, or they're not able to travel at that time. So in those top 2 categories, we asked for students' flexibility to give us at least 6 options. So in the categories of very interested and interested. And then even further, we asked for at least their top 3 in the very interested category. So at a minimum, we need 6 options, and out of 58, that's, to boil it down to 6 should be pretty easy for most students. And then at a minimum, we need 3 top choices. We've done this now for the 2 full years, and this will be our 3rd year running. And we found it to be a successful way to place as many students in their top choices as possible, but also to encourage students to think about the whole program and the offerings available to them instead of getting kind of zoned in on one location and one location only. As you see, we have over 86% participation in the program. We have limited space. We have 24 spaces on each site. And, in that model, we just can't satisfy everybody in what would be essentially their first choice. But redesigning it this way, like I said, gives students the opportunity to think about more than just one place. And I've found, and I think our team has found as well, that it's led to more people being satisfied with their choices because they've thought a lot harder about more places than just their top choice. So if a student is having trouble kind of navigating this preference form, or if they're having trouble coming up with those 6, we really encourage them to come talk to us soon so that we can talk about what the challenges that they're facing are, whether it's the term that they're looking at or other questions that they have. So that's a little about the preference form. Another factor to consider, obviously, is the budget and finances. So there are program fees associated with most of our off-campus programs. The out-of-pocket estimated cost ranges from $0 for our Worcester programs all the way up to around $8,000 for some of our more expensive sites. About 50% of the sites fall in around $5,500 or less. As a reminder for the class of 22, so for most of you that are on this call as sophomore parents, your students still have the full $5,000 scholarship. I know there's been some confusion, and you may see on our website that it is now up to $5,000. For your class, as long as you're a class of 22 parent, they still will have $5,000 for eligible programs. That scholarship will show up as a credit on their bill for the semester that they're going away. And we'll work with the students to make sure that they submit the right paperwork to get that scholarship onto their bill. It can be used one time, applicable to any of the Global Projects programs. And there's nothing beyond submitting a form to financial aid that has to be done in order to be eligible to get that. We don't ask for receipts, or we don't ask for, further information about how the scholarship was used. Essentially, for the semester that a student would be completing a project, you would see the program fee. And then for the eligible program, you would see the credit of the global scholarship for that time. As a reminder, that if a student is living on campus and they are going away, housing is contracted for 4 terms. So there is the option to do a term-based housing if a student is able to stay in one housing and then move out for the term that they're away and then come back. Although much like any lease, most students end up keeping their on-campus housing. They go away for a term and then they come back. So happy to answer more questions about that too. And finally, I'm sure this is on your minds, and I think it's on everyone's minds, that at the moment we still have students working remotely on project work. So since D20 and moving forward through the fall, our students are completing their projects remotely, most of them still with their international or off-campus sponsors, but not able to travel to those sites at the moment. So in normal times, and I'll call it normal, our staff is on a 24/7 emergency phone supporting our students and our faculty who are away We have very close relationship with our medical and security assistance provider, International ISOS. We also have a travel medical insurance that every traveler is covered under at WPI, and we're consistently monitoring world events that are happening that could affect our groups. So I say normal times because everything that happens in the world, even pre-pandemic, has an effect on our programs. So even in the last year, we've had to readjust start times for programs due to wildfires in Glacier National Park, or we had to relocate a program due to protests in Hong Kong. We actually moved our Hong Kong groups to Melbourne because we didn't feel that it was safe to be in Hong Kong at that time. So the impact of the pandemic is new and unprecedented for all of us. And I know that we are all navigating this, this new time, but the response to how that could change the response to how world events change our programs is something that we're pretty well versed in. We have a staff member who's dedicated to international risk management, but quite frankly, our whole staff is part of that risk management team and part of the emergency response team if something were to happen. So in the current climate, as I mentioned, projects are currently being completed remotely. We are actively considering a multi-factor approach to travel resumption and to looking at each of our individual sites and what it would take to resume travel to those sites. We plan to make a decision on our C and D term programs by early to mid-October. And we are obviously watching the climate of each of those places to see what makes sense. What it comes down to too is that this is a WPI-wide decision. Our office is clearly a very big part of this decision, but we also have to engage with the whole community and make sure that we are protecting the bubble of our institution. And we send a lot of people to a lot of places, and we want to make sure that our faculty and our students are safe. What I like to remind the students, and I will remind you as well as parents, is that a large benefit to our program is that even if travel is not possible, a student can still do their IQP. It may be different, like many things that are different right now for us, but I think it is a very big benefit and a positive thing for students that the IQP doesn't get delayed and that graduation is still number one on our minds. So that's something to remember. And what I've told students and what our staff is telling students as well is that if there is a term that works for you and it has made sense in your academic plan for the whole time you've been at WPI, stick with that term if that's what still makes sense. So if E21 has always been the plan of when you wanted to do your IQP, stick with that term and we will make sure that you have a project. It's our hope that that project is happening off campus, but we don't want academic plans to get fully mixed up just in hopes that travel will be available at that time. Happy to take more questions about that too, but I wanted to make sure that we address that first. So that's all I have. And I will just say one thing about the application timeline before I pass it on to our question moderator, Deb. The application is now open. It has been open since August 28th. It will close on October 5th. And then we will have placement decisions to students by December 22nd. There's a lot that has to happen in that interim in terms of the decision-making process, but students get their placements and then they have about a month to commit to their placement. I believe the commitment deadline is January 25th. So that whole timeline is on our website, but I would encourage you to just take a look at it if you have any questions. So with that, I will pull down my slides and pass it over to Deb for our questions.
Hi, Erin. We have a question about the scholarship. You mentioned how the scholarship is used for students who are graduating in 2022. Many of our sophomores right now are graduating in 2023. Can you talk a bit about how the scholarship applies to those students?
Yes, and I think I misspoke on class year. I have confirmed with the financial aid office, and we have, made sure that everything is correct. That this class, the sophomore class, the current sophomore class, who is graduating in 23, still has the full 5,000 for eligible programs.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying.
Is it true that if students list a U.S. location as one of their options, they will automatically be put at the U.S. location? And does that include Hawaii?
So no, I think what I'll say about that is so students are listing their preferences on the preference form, and as you can imagine, some of our sites are receiving many more people who have rated those sites as very interested than we can obviously place. So, some of our top sites are getting as many as 350 people who say, I'm very interested in this site. A lot of our domestic programs are just as popular. I think our national parks programs, our Hawaii program, have seen a lot of interest. I will say that if a student rates a program that is potentially not receiving as much interest, it's more likely that we'll place them there because it's just, a matter of the math. So if there's only 80 people interested in a site versus 350 people, it's more likely that a student will be placed at that place that had less interest to begin with. So we have a form online for students, and we're happy to talk through this with them as well. But we have listed the sites that have typically received highest interest in the past. I believe we have like the top 12 that have received the highest interest in the past. And what we encourage students to think about is if they only list sites that are in that high interest category, then it will be harder for us to place them in one of those places. So it is unlikely that we will not be able to place, as long as the student is flexible and has given us enough options, it's unlikely that we will not be able to place them somewhere. However, if they only put the sites that another 350 people have also marked as very interested, it could be harder for us to place them. So what I wouldn't say that it's an automatic that a student is going to be placed in a site that has lower interest, but it is a consideration for good as well, that if a student is interested in a site that maybe is not listed on that category, there could be a higher likelihood that they get placed there. So it's also a good thing. There's even international sites that are not on that list, and could mean that if a student puts that site, they're more likely to go there.
Thanks, Erin. Our next question is, for references, what are you looking for? Professors, employers, coworkers?
So the first reference, we're looking for the names of two references and contact information, not letters. And the first reference should be a WPI faculty member. I know that students are one semester into their sophomore year, so we just encourage them to think about maybe faculty that they went to office hours with or had a closer relationship with during their first year. But that first one needs to be a WPI faculty member. The second can be anybody, any of the options that you listed, coach from high school, maybe a club advisor, maybe a staff member here on campus that they're very close with. So that is, the second one can be a little bit more flexible.
Thank you. Is there a place on the application that a student can mention certain terms they cannot attend IQP based on class offerings in their major?
Yep. So that's the preference form. So based on, this is definitely a consideration for some majors. And if a student has questions, they can talk to the academic advising office or also to their academic advisor in their major. But if there are terms that don't work for them because of other class commitments, then they should make sure that the projects in that term are in their not interested category. And that's how they would tell us, I cannot go in B term or whatever term it is.
You touched on this briefly before, but what if there are fewer than 6 locations that a student is interested in? If he is fine doing an on-campus IQP if he doesn't get the choices he wants, but doesn't want to take a spot on some other site from someone who really wants it.
Okay. So in order to complete the form, you have to select 6 sites, and that flexibility, that's really our sweet spot of how the application process works. We have designed the whole matching system with other, I would say, experts here on campus, and 6 is the magic number. If a student, for whether it's personal or academic reasons, feels like they can't find 6, they should come talk to us. I think it would be important first to make sure they have considered all of their options. But the second part of the question I find to be so WPI, because our students are so caring and thoughtful of each other in so many ways. And while I think it's admirable to think about, well, I don't want to take a spot from somebody else, I do think that the system that we have will make sure that as many people get the spaces that they're interested in as possible. And if a student receives a placement and then decides later on that on campus would be better for them, they can withdraw from that placement. Well, they can either not accept that placement or withdraw within our time frame. We do have a cancellation schedule. So they would have the opportunity to withdraw from most programs if their plans changed. And then what we do with those open spaces is repost them for students who are still looking for available projects. So I know that this year especially is a little bit more uncertain in terms of what do we want to do next year? Are we certain that off campus is going to make sense? But I would encourage students to still think about all those options, make the choices that are best for them right now. And there's still time in between that to either accept or decline the offer, or to withdraw if it's still within the withdrawal schedule.
Thank you. Are students required to know the native language of where they plan to study abroad?
No, I don't know if we have that many Thai speakers on campus, but we have a lot of people who learn how to say a couple words in Thai, or a couple words in Albanian, for example. Language can be a benefit for some of our sites. So our Spanish speaking sites, there can be some benefit to having some language experience. Some of our China programs, there's a benefit to having some language experience, but none of our sites, save one, have a language requirement. Our Paraguay program is the only site where the interaction with the local community is completed so much in Spanish that the director feels that a higher level of Spanish is required. And that is indicated on the eProject site. And I feel like most of our students know that that's the case for the Paraguay Project Center. So that's the only one where there's any language, more of a language requirement. Most of them, it's either a commitment to some language learning. So some of our other project center, Spanish speaking project centers will ask students to commit to either taking a language course here on campus or doing some online work with bringing up their language ability. Native is really, I mean, we have plenty of students who do speak some of the native languages of some of our locations. And I will say, we even have people who do speak Thai and Albanian on campus, but it's not a requirement, aside from Paraguay.
What percentage of students get one of the top 3 very interested choices?
So the first year, 100%. Yay. The second year, it was over 90%. And I will say again that was from flexibility from the students in thinking about all of their options. And you know, really kind of a testament to that process playing out the way that we expected it to, so that we were able to take the options that students had given us and try and place as many people in those top choices as possible. Last year, some of the reasons that maybe students did get their interested choice over their very interested choice was related to a large class, a capacity, you know, that was getting maxed out in some of our centers, and the need for that flexibility. So we will do our best to place as many people in their top category. That is the goal. But there could be some students who are placed in their interested category. So we always want to remind students that they shouldn't put anything down that they wouldn't be happy with. Obviously, there's going to be some, you know, some implicit, like, I hope it's this one versus this one. But if we had to look at the interested category, we will still assume that the student has put those places down for a reason. We'll never place somebody in a not interested category.
What criteria are used for assigning students to programs?
Criteria, great, thank you. So we look at the whole application. The application is designed with faculty directors from the sites, and as the goal of it is to kind of see where have students had some teamwork experience, some possible work experience, how have they done academically, and how's their writing so far. So that's where you'll see each of the elements of the application. We look at transcript with the A-term grades included, GPA, but there's not a GPA requirement. It's just one of many elements. There's 2 essays that students complete, and the content and the quality of those essays are important. So taking care in writing them, maybe going to the writing center. If students feel like they want to get a little bit more feedback, that's all part of having a strong application. And then resume too. Students can include things on their resume that go back to high school, especially if they have teamwork experience or big projects like Eagle Scout projects or other big, you know, robotics competitions, things like that, that would show their experience in working on a team. That's a great thing to put on the resume. So those are some of the criteria that are evaluated as part of the process.
What is considered an eligible program with regard to scholarship, and what exactly does the scholarship cover?
Great. So the scholarship is a credit. Like I said, we're not going to ask for receipts or anything afterwards. So the scholarship is meant to defray the cost of travel associated with that program fee and any of the non-billable costs for the program. So the on each of our project center pages on eProjects, we give the students a budget sheet and we show them what the program fee for the site is, and then what other elements they should be budgeting for the center. So that would include things like airfare, which is an out-of-pocket cost, meals, other incidentals. So the scholarship, the scholarship is meant to defray that whole cost. Some of the only thing that will be on the bill is the billable program fee. Give an example of like Cape Town. Let's say that the program fee is $2,800. That would show up on the WPI bill for that semester, but then the credit of $5,000 would show up on that same bill. So, basically balancing that out. And then it's pretty individualized from there, what happens with the rest of the credit. Some families may choose to just leave it on as a credit and it goes towards tuition. Some families may already have loans that cover tuition. So if you have an overpayment, you can request a refund. But essentially it's the student's money, it's a credit on their bill, and then they can decide what to do with it from there.
Are there opportunities for study abroad separate from the IQP?
Oh, great. Good question. So yes, we have humanities and arts programs. There's programs where students can complete their humanities requirement off campus. Those, if we have any freshmen or first year parents on the call, those are great opportunities for first year students to even be considering, because typically students will think about those for as soon as their sophomore year. It's not too late for sophomores either, though. There's plenty of times that even a senior is doing a humanities off-campus program. There's also MQP off-campus opportunities. They are major specific, so students will have to consider that. Some majors have more opportunities off campus than others. It just depends on the major and the department. So that's one option. And then finally, there are some exchange programs. So we have a program in Germany for exchange where students can complete humanities requirement as well as more German language learning. And we have a French exchange for business school students. And we have, or we did have in the past, a Stockholm, Sweden exchange. I'm not sure if that's offered right now, but there are opportunities to go off campus outside of the IQP.
Thank you. How does the scholarship work if a student is doing an on-campus IQP?
Great question. So the scholarship is meant to go towards the global projects program, any off-campus opportunity. So that would not be, it would not be eligible for an on-campus program. And right now, the lines, that's why I kind of wanted to explain the difference between the on-campus and the off-campus, because obviously we have students who are working remotely from campus right now. And in the sense that the scholarship is meant to go towards defraying the cost of travel, there was an adjustment to that scholarship for this semester. But if a student is doing a purely on-campus IQP, they would not be eligible for the scholarship towards that project.
This application seems to be only for off-campus IQP. What if my student's first choice is for on-campus IQP? Is it a separate application process?
Yes, so that's correct. This is the off-campus IQP application, which we conduct the whole application for the next academic year in the fall. There will be an on-campus fair for on-campus IQPs in the spring, and that's typically right around St. Patrick's Day that we have an on-campus IQP fair. So whole sophomore year is about setting up IQP for junior year, or typically junior year. So if a student is looking for on campus, there's nothing they need to do right now. That typically happens in the spring.
Okay, and this next question, I'm not sure exactly what they're asking. How are assignments given to have students get one of their 3 sites? First application received. I think it may be asking if first come, first serve for the top sites.
Okay, so yeah, it's we ask for the student's preference form, and then we do the matching process behind the scenes. So we won't go out and offer a space, ask for a decision, and then re-offer that space. Everyone will get their placement on December 22nd at the same time. Do you think that answers the question, Deb?
I think so.
Okay.
All right. If it doesn't, somebody can re-ask the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
For students that are in ROTC and taking the 3 courses each quarter, plus the ROTC class, will they also have the extra courses needed to prepare for their off-campus IQP without incurring extra fees for taking too many courses?
Good question. So the only consideration sometimes is that 1/6 credit, the PQP, can put some students into an overload if they've already overloaded in that semester. So it's something to think about, especially when the prep term happens in the previous semester, essentially for our C term programs and our A term programs. It's a little bit more of a consideration because the prep term is happening in the previous semester. For ROTC, I'm almost positive that the registrar is able to work with students in terms of how ROTC puts them into overload, or if it does. So that may be a more special question for the registrar. And if you are if you're not able to get the question answered there, please feel free to come back to our office too. Our email is global@wpi.edu, and we can look into it too. But it hasn't been something that's frequently come up, I'll tell you that. It's just, it could be a special case because I'm not sure about how ROTC credits are treated when it comes to overload.
Thanks. Can scholarships be used for MQP or humanities requirement if not used for IQP?
Good question. Yes, they can. So it's a one-time use. And if a student was doing a humanities program before they were doing their IQP, they could use that scholarship towards the humanities off-campus program. The one thing that I will remind students of is that we encourage them to use it for their first off-campus experience, just because now more than ever, but just in general, if plans changed and, you know, let's say a student was holding on to their scholarship because they thought like their MQP was going to be more expensive off campus, we don't want them to hold on to the scholarship and then have plans change and not be able to use it because, you know, maybe they decided not to go off campus anymore or something else changed. So any global projects experience, humanities, IQP, and MQP are eligible. We just encourage students to use it for the first time that they go away.
After placement, can a student ask to be placed in a different project they're more interested in another one of their highly interested sites that they've chosen?
After placement. So after placement, the choice for the student is to either accept or decline that offer. If they decline, they may be able to reapply. What I think I mentioned before is that we will offer available space on a rolling, not a rolling basis, but we usually 4 times a year will repost any available space in the program and students can reapply. But at that point, the options are more limited, and we're usually looking at, transfer students who are just coming in, or maybe students who have had significant change of plans, and that's why they're reapplying. If it's just that a student doesn't like their placement, I would just want to remind them that they want to be careful about what they put on their preference form to begin with, because hopefully what they get is going to be someplace that they've carefully thought about. And if they decline that placement, they're still going to have flexibility about where they would be going after that.
So is travel for IQP all or nothing? For example, would some locations be open to travel but not others?
Oh, this is COVID related?
I think so.
Okay. That's a good question. And I will just be upfront and real with you that that is a future that we will have to think about. That some centers we may be able to resume travel, and some centers may not be ready yet, or there may be other factors involved. So part of the consideration of resumption of travel is sort of there's a balance of, can we go there and should we go there? So, can we go there means, are US travelers accepted in the country, which many places right now, the answer is no. Should we go there is also a question of the impact of a group of students coming to that location, and is it really the right time, or are there any ethical considerations in terms of where we are with the virus, and does it make sense that we should be traveling there? So I can't give a black and white answer to that, but I can tell you that it's definitely part of consideration, that there may be some sites that we're able to open before others. There also may be some considerations that we need to take in terms of how comfortable people are traveling at that point. And do we need to think about, options that would still allow for students to complete the project remotely if they're not ready to travel, but then for the students that are comfortable traveling, could we still have an option there as well? So definitely things to think about as the climate continues to change. Making a decision about the fall, midsummer was the right decision at the time, and it still is. We certainly recognize that you don't want to make a decision too soon because things are changing so rapidly, but we also don't want to wait too long when there's a lot of planning that has to go into place to get ready to travel. So I think every decision point is going to be very much related to where we are and where the overall world climate is at that time.
Thanks, Erin. Place for housing, safety, procuring food, etc. Or is it different for some locations where it's more independent than supported than others?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is very different, and we go into the details of this on e-projects for the students. So there are some locations where food is provided. That's listed online, and some that come to mind are Monteverde, Costa Rica, and Switzerland. Excuse me, not Switzerland. India. I don't know why I was thinking about Switzerland. But I would encourage students to go back to e-projects for that specific information, because there are some places where meals are provided. In every location, when it comes to housing, our goal is to have, when possible, self-catered apartments where students have access to making their own food. So 7 weeks is a long time to be away, and buying food out and about every day could get quite costly. So giving students access to a place to store cereal or pasta or be able to make their own food, that's a goal at most of our centers, is that they have access to kitchens.
I think we have time for maybe a couple more.
Sure.
What if for health or financial reasons, the student has to change projects to an on-campus project? Can they do that?
Absolutely. So our office is here to work with students, and we know that, you know, things come up that can change plans, even if we're back to a normal situation. There's definitely still times that plans change. So we will work with the student to figure out what works best at that time. It could be that moving to an on-campus project is the best choice. It could be that you know, withdrawing from the project center and maybe reapplying for another term would be the best choice. But the best thing to do is engage with our office if that were to come up.
Can you please explain which terms students are applying for now, due in October? And if this is an annual process, or does the process occur multiple times a year? And are multiple students applying all at once, or just the class of 23 this year?
So it is an annual process. This is the fall application process for all 21-22 programs. And we include E21 next summer through the following E22, the summer of 22. So the whole academic year is open now. And this is for any student who is eligible to apply right now. So any student that has sophomore status, that could be incoming first year students if they had enough credits to be indicated as a sophomore, which they can confirm at the registrar. But there could be some juniors or potentially even some seniors who are thinking about off-campus programs or haven't yet gotten an IQP. So the majority of applicants are probably in the current sophomore class, but it depends on eligibility. And then I'll say that this is the annual process and the largest time that students apply. But as I mentioned, we do have space that becomes available throughout the year. It's just, there's less flexibility in knowing exactly what that space is going to be. So this is the time where the students have the most options available to them. Deb, I'm wondering if we want to go like 5 more minutes. Is that okay?
Sure, we may be able to finish up the questions here if we go just a bit longer.
Sure.
If a student's very interested choices are high demand sites and their interested choices are lower demand sites, would they be more likely to be placed in an interested choice instead of a very interested choice?
Okay, I have the question here, so I'm just going to read it one more time. If the student's very interested choices are high demand sites and their interested choices are lower demand. No, so the way that it works is that the goal is always to place as many students in their very interested choice. So if a student puts a lower demand site and they're interested, we're not going to automatically move them down to that lower demand site without first evaluating them for their very interested choice. So a little bit more math heavy, but essentially every student has, their application is scored on a rubric for all of the factors that are considered in their application. And then their preferences really drive the final placement process. So if they indicated a top choice, very interested preference for a certain site, their score for that site would be higher. And then if they indicated a preference of interested, their score would be half as high because that score would be multiplied by 0.5 instead of 1, so that there's more likelihood that they would be placed in their very interested choice. In the same way, for those math geeks out there, the not interested sites would be multiplied by 0. So there would never be a chance that a student would be placed at a not interested site. Deb, is there anything you want to add? Because Deb is actually our placement guru. Did I answer that okay?
I think you answered it very well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Is there a thought in the future to allow students to quarantine before or after traveling to the IQP, if that's what's needed to get into a country or a center? And if that does happen, would that potentially change prices?
That's a good question. I do think that there's going to be impacts of how we travel to places that could come into play as we resume travel. So if we were at a point where resumption of travel was deemed safe, and as an institution we were ready to go with that, but the location had some requirement that once everybody was in country, they needed to get tested or quarantine for a certain amount of time. I think that could be in our future. That could be part of the pre-departure process that we work with students on. In that way, it really feels a lot to me like the way that we advise on visa processes. So for some countries, students need an extra visa or stamp in your passport or sticker in your passport before you arrive. And our office is involved in that process and helps facilitate the application process when every student in the program needs a visa. So there could be some impact on things like this in terms of entry into a country, and depending on where we're at in the world at that time, it would definitely be something that our office would be looking at and advising students on. And sorry, Deb, potentially changing prices. We have to work within the term, so we wouldn't be able to have students go any earlier. I don't foresee that, but we might have to make some adjustments within the term. But yeah.
Thanks, Erin. This is the final question. Can students currently review the details of all projects or just location and past project history?
That's a good question. So the answer is yes. There's multiple places where you can find this information. So on eProjects, all of the directors have listed some sample projects in the description on the program page. A lot of our project center directors have also prepared additional websites where they kind of curate all the projects that have happened at their center. They like to make these to share them with future sponsors or just to have kind of a catalog of what's happened. So that's a place that students and parents can find to see a little bit more about the projects that have happened. And then the last place is the WPI Library website. If you go on the home page, there's a little search bar and you can click on projects and you can search all the projects that have happened by keyword and by portion of a title and things like that.
I think that's it, Erin.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for staying over just a couple more minutes. It was really great to chat, and please reach out to our office or have your student reach out if you have any questions. Have a great day.